It was. All right. So yeah, my name's Larry Steckel, and I'm an extension weed specialist with the University of Tennessee, located here at Jackson, Tennessee. My research is on weed management in cotton, corn, soybeans, and wheat, our major row crops. The primary thrust of a lot of my research is on managing glyphosate-resistant weeds in the context of trying to keep conservation tillage in play here in Tennessee. We just can't afford a lot more tillage. A lot of my work, recently has been looking at a lot of the new technologies and how they can help us on managing these glyphosate-resistant weeds. Now, mare's tail first came on the scene, first identified back in 2001. About 2003, it spread very readily, and gosh, as of the last 6-7 years, it's on every acre. Glyphosate-resistant Palmer pigweed was the first identified back in 2006. In 2008, it really started to spread, and again, it's virtually on every acre now in Tennessee. So all my growers here in Tennessee have to contend with two glyphosate-resistant weeds, one that's more a winter annual and one that's more a summer annual, and trying to keep conservation tillage in play as well. And it's really increased the cost of their weed control. Just an example, most of my growers this year, just in soybeans, most of them were spending around $60 an acre just in herbicides. Some, were up there around $100 an acre. And a lot of it had to do because we've really evolved over time to just doing one burn down application and then able to drop the planter and go. Now that we have both glyphosate resistant weeds in virtually every field, now we're to the point that we've evolved to two burn down applications. And that's kind of one of my hopes of some of this new technology coming online, like the dicamba trait, that it can maybe help cut out one of those burn down applications. I would love to see that and still get better efficacy on the weeds we're trying to control than what we can currently do today with two applications. I think it can save the farmers a lot of money and reduce a herbicide application. I think that's going to be a big plus with some of this new technology coming online. A lot of the research I do, again, is managing mare's tail, Palmer pigweed with the new technologies. Also, we're trying to think a little bit outside of the jug and looking at cover crops and getting those into play. And again, how are those cover crops going to fit into some of these new technologies that come online? I think there can be some pretty decent synergism there in some places. So anyway, I'm optimistic, I think, on the future of weed control, better than I was 3 or 4 years ago when we were really getting into trying to manage these resistant weeds.
Tell us about your trials this year, Larry.
Okay, we had a number of trials this year. Primarily, if we were looking at the dicamba technology, dicamba tolerance technology, we had efficacy trials in cotton, we had them in soybeans, we had some formulation as well in those, looking at different formulations. We had some systems, and really some of the systems that we evaluated this year, to me, particularly with the year we had being so dry, it gave us a unique environment to really look at them. Really showed some interesting things on how these systems can help us manage particularly glyphosate-resistant mare's tail and Palmer pigweed. And some of the things we saw, particularly this year with the dry conditions, was the residual activity that dicamba has. Now, I've always known dicamba's had some residual activity, but it really was pointed out to me this year on a real dry environment. We had, in a system where we went out early with some burn downs, and then right behind the planter planting soybeans, we looked at basically one of our go-to residual herbicides, Valor, and compared it to just using dicamba as a residual herbicide. It never rained, and it's no secret 2012 was a historically dry year, and the Valor never activated, and the Palmer pigweed broke and came through it, whereas the dicamba gave us 3+ weeks of residual control, and it made all the difference in the world on how well we managed the Palmer pigweed because of that. That was probably one of the biggest take-home points I had from this year. We also looked at some other well, we were looking at tank mixing, things like Liberty in with it, sequential applications, looking at with Liberty and dicamba, or with a fameciphin type product like Flexstar, that type of thing, to see if we can control bigger palmer pigweed than we currently can today with those two herbicides. And so I guess that kind of highlights a lot of the research we had.